Good morning, Benoit.
Good
Just wanted
morning.
to do a quick test with you.
Sure.
Sound check, please. See if you can say one sentence.
Yes, good morning. This is Benoit Carpentier from the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies.
Thank you. That should be good. Are you going to sit like this? If you can maybe tilt up slightly your camera, your webcam, like this. Yeah,
Yes.
sounds good. So you have a bit of air on top of your head. Can you? Yeah, depends how you sit. If you go
Yeah.
slightly backwards, it's better. Okay, that's perfect
Okay.
like this. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Good morning, Bilal. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning. I hear you well.
Just
Do you
wanted
hear
to do
me?
a very quick sound check as well. If you can say one sentence, introduce yourself, for example.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I am Bilal. I'm the regional forensic for Africa, based in Nairobi.
Thank you. That's fine. Let's keep it like this.
Okay.
Alors, attends. Hold on. Could you move? Yeah, we see this little paper that you have behind your
Okay.
head. I
I will
hadn't
I will
noticed it.
remove it.
Could you
Yeah, yeah,
could
I
you
will
move
remove
somewhere
it.
else, or could
Yeah,
you
yeah,
maybe move in front of the map that you have on your? No,
yeah,
because we see this paper behind your head,
yeah,
you
yeah.
see, so it's a bit disturbing in
Okay.
terms of video.
Yeah, yeah. One. Oh, like that.
Could you get rid of the paper just for the time of the press conference? Yep. Okay, he's doing.
Good.
Good morning. Welcome to the press briefing of the Information Service of the United Nations in Geneva. Today is Friday, 15th September. We have a long briefing and lots of news on the agenda, but it's really my honor and my pleasure to start this briefing a little bit earlier because we have the honor and the pleasure to have here with us Martin Griffiths, Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Martin will give a few introductory remarks. He will be telling us more about the situation in Libya, and then we will open the floor to questions. He will have to leave soon, so we'll try to get the most out of it. But then we will have other colleagues who will speak also about Libya. So without more ado, I'll let you
Thank you.
open the floor with your remarks.
Briefly, I wanted to talk very briefly about Morocco, but also about Libya. I mean, we all woke up towards the end of last week. We all thought, I'm sure, in this room and elsewhere, that the world was sad and bad and dangerous enough. And then we were wrong because of the terrible scenes that we have all been seeing, thanks to your coverage in these last days. And I think we all remember the Syria and Turkey earthquakes, and we remember the trauma from there. And I want to refer to that when I talk about these issues. But very briefly, as an opening remarks, of course, in Morocco, nearly 3,000 lives. Let's be very clear at this stage. It's a classic aspect of sudden onset disasters. The early figures on the deaths, terrible enough in these cases, by the way, frightening enough in these cases, are likely to be overtaken by events as authorities and rescuers get access to the rubble where so many people, or the floods where so many people are buried. So 3,000 lives claimed in Morocco. I'm sure it's an under evaluation, but it's a carefully done one by the authorities. We, like others, are standing by for requests for assistance. In both these cases and all the cases of sudden onset disasters, you have an immediate phase, the first days, where the attention is rightly on finding survivors and also finding those who have not survived and providing for their interment. properly and respectfully. And then the next phase is to provide aid to those survivors, shelter, food, medical supplies, the inevitable health problems that arise that I'll come to in a minute. So in Morocco, I hope we are moving from one phase to the next and that we're ready. I spoke yesterday to the Deputy Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Lord Ahmed. The United Kingdom is present with other aid from other countries in Morocco. We talk about how we can work with the authorities there to do what we do best, and that is to provide search and rescue, to provide support for coordination, and most importantly, tangibly through the humanitarian agencies, NGOs, as usual in the forefront, the aid that is needed for the survival of the survivors. In Libya, a completely different catastrophe, as we have heard from various authorities, one which is appalling, shocking, I think unimaginable actually in its consequences. I've heard that there are speculations about up to 20,000 maybe dead. I believe there's 4,000 deaths registered at the moment. Again, in Libya, where access to Derna is still so difficult, where there's a compounded problem of the problems of the dams breaking as well as the storm breaking from the sea. This is a tragedy in which climate and capacity has collided to cause this terrible, terrible tragedy. Derna, a city of whatever 100,000 people, 900,000 people affected, and this is on top of the situation in Libya, where 300,000 people in Libya already needed humanitarian aid. Now, we and other agencies are already present in Libya for the humanitarian that's been happening there for some years. We have sent in from OCHA, from my office, from Geneva here, a UN disaster coordination team, 15 people who went to Morocco and then redeployed to Libya. Also communications people, also specialists and experts. We will be hearing from other agents, including the Federation of Red Cross, about that. I think the issue for us in Libya is, of course, coordinating with the government and then the other authority in the east of the country. Secondly, discovering the extent of the problem. We're not there yet in Libya. We don't know the extent of the problem. The floods and the torrents and the destroyed buildings and the sludge still conceal the level of need and death. And then sustaining in that second phase, getting the right aid to the right people at the right time. That's where coordination is so important. It's not a bureaucratic issue, it's a prioritization issue. Helping key humanitarian agencies to do the job they do so well elsewhere. And I'll stop on this, Alessandra. What is so deeply shocking about this is, I think in both cases, and they are very different crises as we know, but in both cases, it's a massive reminder of climate and its presence. We don't need to anywhere in the world, we know that. We face a really, really difficult year ahead, and government capacities are going to be stretched to the limit, as we see in both these countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just make one more point.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
please go ahead.
We have launched an appeal for Libya, flash appeal yesterday, just over $71 million. This was as quick as we could get it out, given the access. We needed to make the needs assessment. I have already spoken to some governments here in Geneva about this. The key sectors are the ones you know well: health, medical, water supply, shelter. And this is my final point: psychosocial support. I remember in the earthquakes how we talked about the terrible noise that shattered families at 4 a.m. Here, the flood started at 2:30 in the morning on Monday morning, and the trauma of families looking desperately, still days after that awful event happened in the middle of the night, to find if their loved ones are alive or dead. We've heard stories of families who've lost 50 or more family members. As I said at the beginning, Alessandra, this is unimaginable. And we must keep our solidarity very clear with the people of Libya and Morocco. Thank you. Sorry.
Indeed, Martin, thank you very much. And thanks for mentioning the issue of climate. And we will speak more later of the Climate Ambition Summit convened by the Secretary General on the 20th of September. But now I'll go to questions, first of all, in the room. And I'll start with Catherine Fiancon. France 24, French channel.
Yes.
Voilà.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Happy to have you here in Geneva with us. Thank you for coming. My question is, first of all, could you please repeat the name of the gentleman you spoke with, Moroccan gentleman, Lord Ahmed? I don't know. I haven't catched his last name. Pardon? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And also what you mentioned, that you had 15 people that went to Morocco, and if I understood well, will be redeployed in Libya or are already redeployed in Libya?
Yeah, sorry, you have a new system.
Sorry. Even I can manage that. Oui, c'était Lord Tariq Ahmed, the Deputy Foreign Secretary, FCDO London, who called me yesterday. Thank you very much to Tariq. And yes, we deployed very quickly. I mean, we've had decades of experience in search and rescue based out of Geneva, as you know. And we deployed what we call an UNDAC team, disaster assistant coordination team, 15 people led by a very experienced OCHA staff member. We also deployed some of our own key staff from the region to help those there. In Libya, we had humanitarian staff already. We have a very, very experienced humanitarian coordinator, Georgette Gagnon, who I think will be on the line later, who I know very well from working together in the past. That we decided, with the consent also of the understanding of the Moroccan authorities, to redeploy that team, and they are now in Libya. And they are progressing. I don't know where they are exactly geographically. I was told coming in there in Benghazi, but they're on the way clearly to the epicenter. And they will help the Libyan authorities on coordination. If you don't have coordination, there's chaos, and that loses lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll continue in the room. Chris and then Mohammed. Chris, AFP.
Christophe Vogt, Agence France Presse. Thanks for taking my question. I actually have two. One on Morocco. Do I understand correctly that for the time being you don't have green light to go into the country with like real means of help? And the second one is on Libya, if I may. It seems that access is really difficult, and there is talk. I think the mayor of Derna offered to or suggested to open a maritime route to go. Does that seem plausible to you? Is that something you're working on? And what kind of means do we need? Are we talking about, French or Italian Navy having amphibious boats coming? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think we're expecting, we've kept in touch in Morocco first, your Moroccan question. We kept in touch very closely. Our resident coordinator, Nathalie Fustier, who also I know very well from the Gulf, has been leading the UN team in Morocco. No existing humanitarian aid program in Morocco before this moment. And so we're keeping very close touch with the line ministries, the foreign ministry, and so forth. And so it was with their agreement that we redeployed our team, as I mentioned. We are expecting and hoping, but expecting from our discussions with the Moroccan authorities, that the request for assistance will go out with today or tomorrow. I mean, very soon, because as I said, Morocco is moving from one phase to the next. They themselves have said that it's aid to the survivors that's priority at the moment. It's always a difficult issue operationally in sudden onset disasters. You need to keep looking for survivors. You need to keep looking, particularly those high Atlas Mountain villages. But the focus on survivors, because they are identified, and helping them avoid the sort of medical threats that are natural in these circumstances are very important. So we're hoping to have that. In Libya, yes, I heard that the mayor said that. It makes complete sense. I don't know directly myself firsthand the arrangements that would need to follow, but it makes complete sense. You've got obviously maritime access. You would ship in aid, as well as, and typically what you do is you don't choose one route over another. You do all of them. You still keep coming in from the land. You still keep finding the people who are fleeing south from Derna towards aid, away from the city. So you need to support them as well. But certainly adding the maritime option makes complete sense.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Anadolu wants.
Thank you so much. As you already mentioned, we have witnessed two different disasters in Morocco and Libya. Do you think that United Nations was ready to respond to these disasters at the same time? Can you praise the United Nations response? Thank you.
I unequivocally say yes to that question. It's a good question because they are, as you say, Mohammed, they're different formed crises, but they were almost exactly the same in time, both requiring massive response, an immediate response. The key characteristic, and we've seen it all over the world, of sudden onset disasters, you have to be there straight away. Disaster search and rescue teams are trained to be there within 24 hours globally, and ours are included. And our teams include representatives from member states, by the way. They're a consortium of member states in our teams. We certainly have more than a single team. The roster of UN disaster coordination teams that we manage through the OCHA Geneva office or support through the OCHA Geneva can certainly manage response to more than one onset disaster at a time. We felt that it was that redeploying to Libya was an efficiency at this time. They were there in the region, people speaking Arabic and being able to engage quickly and effectively. But we're equally ready to build up more coordination, but more aid is what's really needed now into Morocco. The agencies, of course, have been in Libya all this time. We've heard about them in the media. The World Food Programme, I know, has a program of assistance through local partners, as usual. Local partners are the key in both places. And what we're waiting for in Morocco is that moment of the green light to start the process. And look, let me be very clear. In my experience of sudden onset disasters, that first few days is always days of relative confusion. Responding to the complexity in a period of trauma is very difficult for governments, for administrations, for ministries, for local organizations. Nobody should be surprised by how attention is focused on other things when we want it to be about ourselves. But the signs are very good in Morocco that we will be able to provide support, and you can be damn sure we'll be ready. Thank you.
Martin, I know you have another commitment just after this, but if we can take at least one more question, is it okay? Yeah. I have Jamie Keaton, who has been waiting on the platform for a while, Associated Press. Jamie.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Griffiths, for coming to see us. I too have two questions. I just wanted to get you mentioned the green light. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you nod if you can hear me?
Yeah, just go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead.
You can hear my question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I wanted to just ask you about both situations. One, very quickly, you mentioned the green light. I mean, there's been a little bit of a hand-wringing and a little confusion as to why international aid, particularly UN aid, was not called for right away. You've mentioned you're waiting for the green light from Morocco, and you've said on numerous occasions that coordination, which is your expertise, you're the coordinator. How surprised were you that the call was not made to OCHA to get more involved in this, being that this is your area of expertise? That's the first question on Morocco. And then just very quickly on Libya, if you could just tell us exactly what the pressing needs are now. I mean, you mentioned the search and rescue and under the rubble and the earthquake of Morocco, but what is the urgency now for Libya? I mean, what can be done and what needs to be done in the very immediate phase? Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. Two very relevant questions. In Morocco, we stood by. It's important that the government, which has primary responsibility and frankly has the resources needed in any country, the primary resources needed to respond to the needs of its citizens, needed to be clear on its own organizational arrangements on getting access to its people. And Morocco has a very distinguished history in recent years of building up very deliberately, putting a lot of investment into its response capacities. And they were very clear with us that they needed to avail themselves of their own highly developed assets. And they didn't need us at the beginning, but the beginning is only last Saturday, and we're not that late, much later now. So I don't have any critical remarks to make at all. We are ready to work, and we're ready to provide support on coordination. And critically, OCHA is not the primary player here, and critically for the agencies to be able to provide assistance. And it is only in the recent day or so that in Morocco, the shift has been from finding survivors to helping survivors survive. And that's when aid is of the highest importance. It does lead us on to the second question about Libya. And one of the things that we need in Libya, as we saw in Syria, for example, in the Syrian earthquake in February, is the need for equipment to find people in the floods and the sludge and the damaged buildings in Derna and its environs. But also we need those priority areas are shelter, food, key primary medical care because of the worry of cholera, because of the worry of particularly in Libya, the worry of lack of clean water. That's a huge threat to the lives, particularly of children, which is why UNICEF and others are there. But also, so the clear core business of humanitarian response, food, shelter, healthcare, but also in a disaster like this, and Libya, as well as Morocco, but Libya is going to be a huge issue, is psychosocial care. As I said, Alessandro, in my remarks, and as I've seen in the privilege I've had of going to some of these places of tragedy, the damage, the trauma, the unimaginable way in which people are required to get up in the morning and deal with a family which is 3/4 of which have lost their lives in a situation in which all their property has been torn away, in which they have no money, they don't know where to sleep, how are they going to get food? The psychosocial trauma in these moments of crisis are the hidden story that needs so much attention. And humanitarian agencies are well equipped to deal with this. They've all seen it everywhere before, but we're going to see it very, very importantly, I think, in Libya, because of the specific nature of this complicated moment on that Monday morning at 2:30 a.m. with the storm bursting and the dams breaking and taking the lives of God knows how many people we eventually discover. Let's pause a moment just to think of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. I'm sorry for the journalists who are queuing with questions, but Martin really has to go. And we really thank him for having been here, and come back whenever you want. You're always very welcome by our journalists. Thank you. Thank you, Jens. Just for the journalists, let me tell you that there are more people who are going to speak about Syria. And we also you have them on the agenda. And also we have Aser Al-Madaye, who is the chief of mission in Libya of UNHCR, with Matthew, and they are on the line. So we will continue speaking now about Libya and ask Margaret. And Andrew, I don't know if you want to also come on the podium, but we have 3 agencies now who are going to talk to you about a Libya-related issue, although it is a little bit larger, because we are speaking here about health risks and dead bodies from disasters and conflicts. And of course, Libya is very much what comes to mind, especially after what we have heard from Martin. So to speak about this, we have our Margaret Harris, Dr. Harris from WHO. Andrew is here for IFRC with Dr. Tamer Ramadan, who is the IFRC head of country delegations in Libya. He is connecting from Cairo, Egypt. And we also have from ICRC, Bilal Sablou, the regional forensic manager for Africa. He is speaking from Nairobi, Kenya, and Crystal is also on the line if we need to answer if she needs to answer any question. And as I said again, UNHCR is not actively briefing, but their chief of mission is on the line to answer questions if needed. As we said before, as Martin said before, we also have Mrs. Gagnon on the line, Georgette Gagnon. We hope to have a full-fledged press briefing for her maybe next week. But she has been connecting together with Mohamed Azi, who is our communication person in UNSMIL. So I'll, yes.
I think a little confusion. Tamir Ramadan is going to speak about Libya in general terms.
Oh, he's not. I was given of his name on this list. Okay, that's fine.
To him now, given that it follows on quite nicely from what.
Okay, so maybe we'll start, if it's okay with Margaret and with Bilal. So let's start immediately with Tamir, with Dr. Ramadan, to hear just about Libya, and then we go to the dead bodies, and I'll go to questions. So, okay, so thank you. Sorry for the mistake. Thank you very much, and let's go to Dr. Ramadan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd like again to thank you for availing another slot to discuss the situation in Libya and what IFRC is doing hand in hand with the Libyan Red Crescent on the ground. Actually, the situation in Derna is getting more complicated when we talk about the access, in particular when we talk about the increasing number of affected population. The access to the city is now very challenging because there is only one road that leads from Bindi to Derna. There are a lot of humanitarian actors on the ground who are trying to provide aid, but coordination is a key in this response. What we have done recently, that we've received a lot of relief aid materials from neighboring countries and sister national societies. 3 planes came from Turkey, 1 came from Egypt, 1 came from Emirates, 1 came from Kuwait, and another to come from Saudi Arabia. IFRC is deploying 2 flights very soon from Dubai to Benghazi, full of relief item materials as identified by the Libyan Red Crescent. We are deploying also surge teams of technical expertise and capacities to be working hand in hand with the Libyan Red Crescent in the assessment, in the implementation of the operation and rescue operations and implementation of all the plans. Of course, like our colleague from OCHA mentioned, the needs are more or less the same, and the response is also more or less the same. We are providing first aid, health services, evacuation, shelter, temporary shelters. Of course, we are still in the development of proper shelter, and in this regard, I will be very much interested to coordinate and cooperate with the UN agencies who are working to avoid duplication and ensure maximum benefit for the beneficiaries. In addition, to the services the Libyan Red Crescent is providing is the dead body management, which is very much important in this crisis. Dead bodies are in the streets, as we saw in the photos or the media. Libyan Red Crescent has its specialized trained teams to deal with these cases, but not in this massive amount of bodies to deal with. So we are donating body bags and donating also or deploying on the ground expertise to support them. What I wanted to highlight that IFRC has launched an appeal of 10 million Swiss francs over 1 year and a half almost, aiming at supporting the rescue and the relief operations, but also the recovery phase that will soon follow, and it will need a lot of resources and a lot of efforts and coordination, of course. Also, I'd like to highlight that the crisis is not in Derna only. There are 5 more cities in Libya affected by the storm. Derna is the most affected, but also our teams are deployed in Sousse, in Al Baida, in Shahat, in Al Marj, and trying to assist the affected population there. We don't want to about people in other cities and only focus on Derna. That will be all from my side. If you have any questions, I will be happy to respond to.
Thank you very much. I see there are questions. I know that Emma and Nick were hoping to ask these questions to Martin, and that was not possible. But Emma, I'll give you the floor if you want to ask any question to Dr. Ramadan or maybe other colleagues who are involved in the Libya operations. Emma. Emma Farge, sorry. Emma Farge is our correspondent from Reuters.
Yes, sorry, it was for Martin, but I was wondering, do you still have hope for finding people alive in Libya at this stage? And I would also like your thoughts on coordinating aid. What experience have you had with the challenges of dealing with the two sides, and has that really delayed aid efforts? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The hope is still there, it's always there to find people alive. However, if time passes with no signs or no communication, this might be not a very good sign. However, due to the cut of communication, maybe some people are away from the places that they should be, and they are not able to communicate with their relatives or their beloved ones to announce that they are safe. Hope is still there. By time it's diminishing or decreasing, but we will always have hope and faith to find people alive. For your second question about the division and if it's affecting the relief operations, the division has been there for more than 10 years now, and I'm confident to say that it had never affected the humanitarian operations of the Libyan Red Crescent or IFRC. We do have very good relationship with both governments, with authorities on both sides, and they know that we do have our role as humanitarian, neutral, and impartial organization. So they have never hindered or blocked our operations. More in this regard, we hear that the government in the West is deploying medical convoys and supporting aids to the affected people in the East. And this is a very good sign, in my opinion. This is the time for solidarity, not for anything else.
Thank you very much. Let's go to another question on the platform. Nick Bruce, New York Times.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the question. You mentioned that there are more cities than just Derna affected. I wonder if you could give a sense of the overall population in the affected region and the kind of support that will be needed longer term also for that broader population. And secondly, following up a little bit on Emma's question about the two governments, I just wondered, is there a central coordinating body just now? And this is a question perhaps also for Dr. Tamer and Georgette Gagnon. Who are you actually dealing with? And in the recent past, there has been concerns or been reports from Libyan media of armed groups who have, run interference with humanitarian aid deliveries around the country. So I wonder if you're having any experience of that at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I'll start with the second point. With whom do we coordinate? We coordinate with the authorities existing in the area we are working in. That means the authorities of the government in the East, and this is well known and appreciated by the government in the West. And Libya is a very special context. The communication and coordination at the field level may be sometimes more efficient and more important than the biggest or the coordination on a bigger level. For your question, if there is a central coordinating body or something like that, not up to my knowledge, and it's not implemented or not in place. There is a higher committee for the crisis on the level of the government in the East that have representatives from all organizations supporting the crisis in the East, and they are controlling that front.
Thank you very much. And again, if any of the colleagues who are online want to intervene, just raise your hand. I'll go to Christian Ulrich, DPA.
Thank you, Dr. Ramadan. My question is on the figures. Since you have the most teams on the ground, I think, can you give us an update on what you hear from your teams, how many people have died and are still missing? And my other question is, has any of the material that was donated and has been sent by plane, has that actually arrived on the ground in these 5 cities? Thank you.
About the numbers, we do have many sources of numbers right now, and you can see it on the media. So the definite numbers will be available upon the finalization of the assessment on the ground. Then it will be available to publish and to share with all the media. Right now, talking about numbers, while the people, the groups or the teams on the ground are still doing their assessment and counting and registration, it will not be definite or accurate. Your second question about the aids or the materials, has they been arrived to the field? Yes, and in Derna it was kind of chaos, because a lot of relief aid has arrived to the city from many different organizations, including IFRC and its partners and other contributors to the crisis. In the beginning, it created a lot of chaos where they or how they are to be used or to whom it will be delivered or distributed. Right now, there is a new system put in place to register the beneficiaries and prioritize who will be receiving the aid. But yes, the materials, a lot of them are on the ground, a lot of them are on the way to Libya, and a lot other materials to come to Libya in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Christian, you have a follow-up?
Yes, sorry, I come back to the numbers, because on Tuesday you told us that 10,000 people were missing. I wonder whether we revise that figure now. I understand that it's difficult to say, but we had a figure 2 days ago, so it would be good to know now, or 3 days ago, whether this figure has been surpassed or has to be revised down, or whether you can say anything about that. Thank you.
Yeah, last night we had a call with the teams of the Libyan Red Crescent. They will be publishing their the second report by midday. So the numbers, of course, they have changed, but we cannot really say how many are now missed or killed or stranded. Maybe by midday today, there will be definite numbers from the teams on the ground.
Fully understood. Thank you very much. Let's stay with Libya. Oh, Jeremy, I had seen your hand and then it had disappeared. So you have a question for Dr. Ramadan?
Yeah, my hand disappeared. I didn't do anything, but it disappeared anyway. I had a question. I was hoping that someone could answer me in French. Otherwise, English would be fine. But something that has been said about the dead body management. I understand that contrary to what people tend to think, it doesn't pose a health risk. I would like you to maybe elaborate more on this issue, maybe in French, if you can. And is there any difference between the situation in Libya and in Morocco from that point of view?
And you are lucky, Jeremy, because we're going to have a full point on the briefing on that. And indeed, as yours was the last hand up, for Dr. Ramadan specifically, I will now go to that point. Indeed, as Jeremy said, there has been quite a lot of reporting about dead bodies in the streets of Libya and the possible health impact that they could have, the impact they could have on health. So WHO, IFRC, and ICRC have issued a statement this morning, I believe, and we have Margaret, Andrew, and Bilal online to tell us about it. So I'll start with Margaret. I don't know about the French, but maybe we will do something in French afterwards. Maybe somebody can. answer in French. Go ahead.
Sorry, Cheikh Ami, my French, I can answer in French, but it's pretty horrible. I think it would be better in English, frankly, given my accent, etc. Yes, you're right. Dead bodies per se are not, especially after a disaster like this, are unlikely to be a health risk. People have died because of the massive flood or the earthquake, not because of an epidemic-prone disease. So therefore, as such, however, there are certain things, for instance, feces from the dead body can contaminate the water if not handled properly. So this is why proper management is critical. The other thing I'd really like to say, and I should have started with, every person who has died has left behind a raw wound, has left behind grieving people, and this is what matters. Our deepest condolences to all those people. So the reason it's very, very important to manage the safe and dignified burial of people who have died under all circumstances is to ensure that you know who they are, where they are, especially in a catastrophe of this size. It's the families may not know where they are, but at least those managing can document it properly. If it's not rushed, it's a very, very big job, as we've heard, and we'll hear more from my colleagues. But the essential health facts are that people who have died in a catastrophe like this, their bodies do not generally represent a health risk. It is more important to manage the safe and dignified burial because what we're looking at is the health, the physical health, but also the mental health of the survivors. We've got hundreds of thousands physical, but also mental health care so that they can get back on their feet and get their societies back on their feet. I think I'll hand over to my colleagues now.
Thank you very much indeed, as Martin said before about the mental health of the victims. So I'll go now to Bilal, who is coming to us from Nairobi. Bilal Sablu, you are the Regional Forensic Manager for Africa of ICRC. I give you the floor on this subject.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning and good day. First, we express our deepest condolences for all the families. The communities in eastern Libya today are surrounded by death and destruction. Bodies are littering the streets, washing back up on shore, and buried under collapsed buildings and debris. In just 2 hours, one of my colleagues counted over 200 bodies on the beach near Derna. As the death toll from Storm Danielle mounts, I want to counter an unfounded fear that dead bodies from natural disasters, conflict, or other mass casualties events cause disease outbreaks or epidemic. We see this too often strongly reported in the media and even by medical professionals. This is not without consequences. What we see as forensic specialists working on the ground in the wake of disasters like Storm Danielle and during armed conflict is that this misunderstanding often pushes people to hastily bury the body and make it more likely that people will go missing, leaving their loved ones in anguish for years to come. The sheer number of bodies makes responding to the forensic needs in Derna and surrounding area already extremely difficult. My fear is that this misinformation will make this work even harder for the Libyan Red Crescent volunteers and authorities, who are on the forefront of managing the dead in the wake of this devastating disaster. Bodies need to be documented and buried in labeled body bags. Graves need to be mapped so that there is record of who is buried there. The efforts make it possible for loved one to later recover a body and have the closure of a private burial. They help prevent people from going missing forever. The ICRC today sent a cargo flight from Geneva to Benghazi with over than 5,000 dead bodies to help authorities and Libyan Red Crescent volunteers in the dignified management of the dead. This comes after depleting all the stock that we had in country in recent days. The work to recover and bodies dead will take time and can be dangerous. As the recovery effort continue, other supplies like pickaxe, hard hats, and equipment to uncover bodies from rubble will be needed. Those involved in the recovery of bodies could also be at risk from injury from unexploded ordnance which moved with the flood water. We will be doing whatever we can to help this effort with supplies and technical support. The ICRC team, along with our Red Cross and Red Crescent partners, will also be working to dispel this unfounded fears and misunderstanding so that communities can mourn their deceased loved one without fear and can have the closure that they need and deserve. Just a short while ago, together with my colleagues from WHO and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, we distributed a new release with further facts about dead bodies and public health. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Bilal. And last but not least, IFRC, indeed, you wanted to tell us about this release.
Yes, I'm just here representing Gwen Ema, who is our Senior Officer for Public Health and Emergencies and Head of Emergency Operations for the Moroccan earthquake response. And I'm going to read a quick statement from her. An unnecessary rush to dispose of bodies of those killed in disasters or conflict deprives families of the opportunity to identify and mourn loved ones, while providing no public health benefit. Dignified treatment of the dead requires appropriate time to identify the deceased and mourn and perform funeral rites in accordance with local cultural and social norms.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So I'll start with the question, but we will also, just as a heads up, we will also hear more on Morocco from Benoit in a moment. Okay, so let's start with the room. I see Catherine. For our colleagues, Catherine Fiancon is our correspondent of France 24, French channel.
Yes, good morning to all of you. Could I kindly ask Mr. Bilal Sablou to send his notes as quickly as possible? It will help us. And sir, you too, what you just read. I would like to come back to the question of my colleague, a previous question about the bodies and the situation of the bodies, the difference between Morocco, the result of an earthquake, and the result of floods. How do you handle that? Okay, I know that you're more in the field in Libya, but could you explain us what the risks are, the different risks and the differences of the risks? Thank you so much.
Who wants to pick this up? Margaret, or maybe Benoit, you're speaking about Morocco later on, but if you want to intervene, just raise your hand. So I'll start maybe with Margaret.
Essentially, as I said, in a catastrophe like this, people are going about their normal lives, and most of them, vast majority, are healthy people whose lives have just been cut short, whether it's in an earthquake when you're crushed beneath rubble or in floods like this. Now, there is one difference. In floods, you've got a lot of standing water. It doesn't mean the dead bodies pose a risk, but it does mean that the water itself is contaminated by everything. So you really have to focus on ensuring that people have access to safe water, and Martin Griffiths really emphasized this, that the water and sanitation work, but it's not, and you can get some contamination from the contents of the bodies, of the guts of the body, so you can get a risk of diarrheal diseases, but it's not the dead bodies that are the main cause of that risk. It's everything else that's in the water. It's the mud, it's the chemicals from the houses. So in other words, it's not about getting the bodies out of the water and then saying fine. It's not drinking the water and ensuring you have a safe water supply.
Very clear, Margaret, and let's see other people intervening. Okay, so let's go to next. Yes, you have a follow-up?
What are the risks for bodies when there's an earthquake? What are the priorities?
So I think it's the same thing, but I think I refer to our colleague in Morocco, because he's dealing specifically with that. But again, the same thing, safe and dignified burial. The important thing is to identify the people, know where they are. The biggest risk, honestly, is the enormous scar you leave in people, the living, if you don't do what my colleagues are describing. And I really want to say, I've been in so many disasters and seen what they do This is the hardest, the grimmest, the saddest work, and they do it day in and day out. And really appreciate the work of our colleagues in ICRC and IFRC.
Benoît, would you like to say something? Est-ce que tu voudrais dire quelque chose spécifiquement sur le Maroc pour répondre à Catherine?
Thank you. On the dead body management, yes, I mean I fully agree. We have to focus on making sure we find all the bodies, but we also take care very much of the people that are grieving their lost ones. So, as it was said before, there's no health risk as such. It's a bit different probably than in Libya because of the one is kind of related to water with the floods, and one is we're in a very dry context here in Morocco for the moment. But the management should be the same. We should be manage safe and dignified burials, making sure we support people that have lost their loved ones. That's the main focus.
Thank you very much. Benoît is talking to us from Marrakech in Morocco. Cathy, we have a lot of questions.
Oui, mais comme Benoît est francophone, pour la télévision et la radio, ce serait vraiment bien qu'il nous répète ça en français.
Il va nous briefer sur la question au Maroc tout de suite après.
En français.
Finit. Oh, peut-être qu'on va lui demander de faire une partie en français. Mais j'essaye de terminer cet item parce qu'on a le Maroc puis on a d'autres speakers qui attendent. OK, Paula, cette fois, je t'ai vu. Paula Duprat, sorry, for before Geneva Solutions.
Yeah, actually, this was a question for Margaret, just sort of going back to what was discussed earlier, and wanted to understand a little bit how the coordination is when it comes to contact with the governments in these countries, and given the issues that there has been in terms of access, has the WHO been reaching out to authorities in Morocco? Is it each of the agencies that is trying to, I don't know, offer their services to these governments, or is there sort of a focal points in terms of somebody from, say, security from OCHA that's reaching out to the governments?
Well, I'll speak to WHO. So we've got country officers in both countries that have been working a long time. And as I think you know, WHO works very closely with the Ministry of Health. The first thing we do is go to our counterparts in the Ministry of Health and say, what can we do? And that's been happening from the get-go in both countries. Now, the overall UN response, of course, is managed by the resident coordinator, and OCHA coordinates the humanitarian response. So I'll let them speak for what they do, but we are, of course, part of that. But because we are health and we work very much with the Ministry of Health, and we have been in both countries for a very long time with strong country officers, that's how we were able to work very quickly right from the start.
Yeah, and given the access issues in Morocco, I mean, how have you been working in that sort of situation in terms of trying to be there early?
We have been there. For us, we have been able to do the work but of course, it's always directed by the country. The country is sovereign, and we work with the Ministry of Health in partnership.
Indeed, and we'll hear more from Benoît in a second. I've got still 3 questions. I'll take those, then we will listen from Benoît, and then we will go to the other speaker who are waiting. So Emma Farge, Reuters.
Thank you very much. I wanted to know what the scale of the mass burials and the mass cremations were. Do you have any anecdotes from what you've been seeing on the ground, and do you know how many have been buried in that fashion or cremated in that fashion? Thank you.
Who wants to take this up? Do we have numbers? Emma, I guess you're speaking about Libya?
Yes, Libya, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I can ask Tamer if he has any information on that.
I'm not sure if Tamer is still there, but if we can take that question and come back to the journalist who asked it.
Okay, fine.
Later.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Dina Abissab.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. My question goes to ICRC, please. Maybe Mr. Bilal Sablouh may answer. We read yesterday in the news release that in Derna there is a danger of unexploded ordnance and abandoned munition stores. Do you have any more information about those stores, maybe some numbers, and how risky is the situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramadan. He is not connected anymore. So who would? Bilal, maybe Bilal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, we are working with our specialist in ICRC, and we are now evaluating the situation and developing different guidance and providing will be providing support to the national society and the authorities in this place. As I mentioned in my speech, that yes, there is this risk now because many of this ordnance were washed by the water, and this is one of the concerns that we are now addressing in Derna with our specialist ICRC and with our partners in the movement, Red Cross, Red Crescent, and the Federation, and in coordination with the authorities.
And I see Crystal Wells, ICRC spokesperson here in Geneva, also wanted to intervene. Crystal.
Hi, thank you very much for this question, and I hope you all can hear me and see me okay. This is a major concern today for the International Committee of the Red Cross. I think what we have to remember with regards to Libya is this is a country that suffered from obviously years of conflict and violence and the ripple effects of that protracted conflict. We don't have a full scope right now in terms of the level of weapon contamination in the area, but it's something that our teams will be looking into because it obviously can create additional risk for communities, for first responders, and as my colleague Bilal pointed out, for those who are doing the very tragic and sad job of trying to recover the remains of those who died.
Thank you, Crystal. I have a question from Jamie Keaton, Associated Press. And then we will go to
Mike. Hi, Alessandra. Thank you. My question was for Mr. Ramadan. Is he no longer on the call?
Oh, he's gone, Mr. Ramadan. But Andrew can take notes if you want to ask his, or maybe you send your question directly to him, to Andrew.
I guess I could do that. I was really just trying to figure out if, and maybe somebody else will have these numbers, but the number of bodies that have been so far buried. I mean, I know Cristiano was trying to get the numbers from Mr. Ramadan earlier, but maybe he could be specific about the numbers of maybe.
I think Andrew said that he was taking this question back and come to you with an answer, right?
I'm not sure whether we'll have an answer, but we'll certainly come back to you and give you whatever we have.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Benoit, let's hear from you for the rest of your briefing on Morocco. If you could do indeed some parts in French, you would be very welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll try to switch my brain in between. So I'll start in English and you'll let me know when you want me to switch to French. Well, I'm not going to go back too much in the numbers that have been mentioned by Mr. Griffith earlier. I can talk to you a bit more about what I see here since I've arrived. And we're talking devastation in many, many villages. I was in the field yesterday, quite far away from Marrakesh. It's about 280 kilometers. And the village I was in, half of it was completely flattened, and another probably half of it was the houses were damaged. And that's a 30,000 people town. We're facing here a disaster where it's not centralized in one place. It's hundreds and hundreds of villages that are scattered in the mountains. Some will be like the one I went to yesterday, 30,000 people. That's not a village, it's a little town. But we're talking about sometimes little villages that has 10 or 100 people. So we're working here with the Moroccan Red Crescent and their volunteers, and they're basically, their job now is to try to make sure we have a coverage of all these villages. So they're working very closely with the local authorities. I was hearing about the coordination. So we have coordination at all levels. So at national level with the authorities, at regional level but also at communal village level to try to map out all the needs from the populations, from the small villages to the towns that have been affected. I've heard many times the epicenter is 75 kilometers away from Marrakesh. It's 75 kilometers radius and more. The village I was in yesterday was 280 kilometers away from Marrakesh and was very heavily affected. So the logistic aspect of this operation is going to be crucial. Again, the volunteers here of the Moroccan Red Crescent they are from those communities. I mean, Moroccan Red Crescent has 8,000 volunteers across the country, so obviously not just in that region. And that is only the ones that are mobilized normally as volunteers, but there's been an influx of solidarity and people wanting to volunteer to support people that have been affected. So the operations for the last weeks have been obviously the search and rescue operations, first aid, psychosocial support, which has been flagged many times, which is crucial, providing food and water. But the needs that are now coming is shelter. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are still without a roof on top of their head. They need shelter. They need mattresses to be able to sleep under, blankets, warm clothes. On Tuesday next week, they're expecting storms and rain, and people are still sleeping outside. In the coming weeks, in the mountains, it's going to be 0 to minus 10 degrees. We need to make sure all these people have some kind of roof on top of their head. It's going to take weeks, months, years to be able to rebuild, because we're not talking repairs, we were talking about rebuilding some of these villages. So this is the situation at the moment. We're deploying teams here for water and sanitation and hygiene, which is one of the crucial points in this response as well, and the logistic emergency unit that will be deployed in the coming days. And then we'll do a more global assessment to see what are the other needs. We will have flights of goods coming in the country in the coming hours as well. Just before I stop, I just wanted to, because behind the numbers, and we've heard a lot of numbers, 3,000 deaths, and we don't know if it's going to be a final number, but behind all these numbers, there are individual people. And these people are the ones we will need your help to relay, to continue talking about these emergencies. We tend to disappear from the news in a while. All these villages and the people in these villages. Yesterday, I met with a person called Sahid. Sahid is 39. He was not in his village when the earthquake struck. But when he came back, 2 of his 3 children, named Mohammed Hasna, who was 11, and Ibrahim was 5, were pulled out of the rubble by his father and were both dead. These are the stories of the people that we hear in every single villages. And we need to make sure we keep on telling their stories and we support them in the long run and not just in the first month after the emergency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benoit. I don't see any hands up for questions. So I'd like to thank all those who have been participating in this briefing. And thank you very much for following up on the questions of the journalists. I'll go now to my right. We have the pleasure to welcome Mr. Jose Rosero Moncayo, who is the director of the Statistical Divisions of FAO, who will tell us about the launch of the Tracking Progress on Food and Agriculture-Related SDG Indicators 2023 reports of FAO. Please.
Hello and good morning to everyone. So as you all know, we are in the midpoint of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and the clock is ticking in order to meet the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So this edition of the FAO report that is entitled Tracking Progress on Food and Agriculture-Related SDGs Indicators offer a critical look on how much we have progressed so far on the food and agriculture-related SDG targets. Earlier this year, the UN Secretary General sounded the alarm on the SDGs, declaring them to be in deep trouble and calling for a drastic rescue plan. And next week, world leaders will gather in New York for the second SDG summit. And this summit will take place in one of the most challenging moments in recent time, moments in which we are still dealing with the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, also with the impact of armed conflicts happening around the world, with high inflation, and along with the escalating effects of climate crisis. And we just heard testimony of that in the previous interviews. For this reason, the SDG Summit has triggered enormous expectation for concrete action plans to reverse the current downhill trends and kickstart a new drive to achieve the SDG goals. In this sense, the timely release of this FAO report provides an opportunity for decision makers to have an evidence-based discussion on how to transform agri-food systems in a way that brings us closer to achieving the SDGs. So what are the main conclusions of this year edition? And let me begin by saying that while the world was already off track from meeting the SDGs even before the year 2020, the past few years have seen multiple shocks that have further stalled or even reversed progress across the several targets that are related with the SDGs on food and agriculture. The world overall has made no improvements on achieving the SDG 2 of zero hunger, and shockingly, the proportion of the world population that suffers from chronic hunger in 2022 was about 9.2% compared with the 7.9% in 2015. And the latest estimates of FAO were still putting the global hunger figure between 691 million and 783 million people. In addition, investments in agriculture have stalled. There is no progress in conserving animal genetic resources, and forest area across the globe continues to shrink. Only in few areas we have noticed positive trends. For example, in the conservation of plant genetic resources, on water use efficiency, and also in the adoption of instruments to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. To add to this green picture, FAO assessment is necessarily incomplete, as many SDG indicators are still struggling with substantial data gaps in terms of geographical coverage, timeliness, and also disaggregation. And this is one of the salient topics that will be discussed at the SDG Summit. Simply, we cannot achieve what we cannot measure. And recent analysis by several partners have shown that for every dollar that is invested in creating data systems, we have an economic return equivalent to $32, which is an astonishing multiplier effect. Therefore, there is the need to speed up investments in data generation and capabilities, in particular in less developed countries, to be able to guide transformative change. I encourage all of you to read the new FAO SDG progress report, and let me close by emphasizing that the FAO is committed to make all the efforts that are possible and feasible in order to rescue the SDGs and delivering our collective promises for the people and the planet. Thank you for your attention, and my team and I are here during this morning, the whole morning, and we will be happy to answer your questions about this topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moncayo. And I'll give you a little bit more information also on the SDG summits later on. So any question to FAO? Paula Dupraz, Geneva Solution.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to know, are these efforts to boost up data collection, is that being coordinated here from Geneva?
No, okay, thank you for your question. In the UN system, all this type of effort that have to do with collecting SDG indicators and also to promote the capacities of countries to produce and report on SDGs are under the umbrella of the United Nations Statistical Commission. Every single one of the 231 SDG indicators has a specific custodian agency that is responsible and is responsible for advancing on the methodologies of these indicators, but also, and more importantly, to promote activities of capacity development at country level for countries to do this. So there is a very well-coordinated effort in which every single one of the United agencies that are custodian of these indicators work.
Thank you. Other questions in the room? Katrina? I saw your hands moving now. Okay, any question on the platform? I don't see any. So thank you very much, Mr. Moncayo, for this interesting insights in the report. And it gives me the opportunity to remind the journalists that on the 18th and 19th September in New York, heads of states and governments will come together for the SDG summit with only 7 years, as we have heard, remaining for the implementation of the goals. Only 15% of SDG targets are on track to being achieved. And it's against this sobering backdrop that the SDG summit will be an opportunity for all sectors of society to accelerate actions towards the implementation of SDGs. Before that, today, at 10 a.m. New York time, 4 p.m. here, the UN Deputy Secretary General, together with Achim Steiner, Administrator of UNDP, Selwyn Hart, Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General of Climate Action, and the Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination and Interagency Affairs of DESA, Francesca Spatolisano, they will all come together for a press briefing as a preview of the SDG Summit and the high-level week of the 78th session of the General Assembly. As I said, this is today, 4 p.m. Geneva time. Of course, it will be in New York, but you can follow this live on UN Web TV. We have already sent you information about the high-level events of next week, but I just would like, as we speak about SDGs, to inform you that ahead of the SDG summit, the UN Department of Global Communication, to which, as you know, we belong, has launched a challenge, which is called the #ActNow challenge, this one, to mobilize 100,000 actions for the SDG across the world. We are already on track to exceed this number, but we would really like you to talk about this as the challenge will run until the 17th of September. Each time that time goes by, we will focus on one of the 4 Act Now action areas, which are the actions for a healthy planet, for a world working together, for a better economy, and for a just society. So I really invite you to download the app and contribute to that or speak about it. And of course, we will keep you informed on the events of next week. But this is today at 4 p.m., as I said. So let's go ahead now with our last 2 speakers that, as I always say, and it's true, they are not definitely the least. So I'll start with Anne Basson. Anne, can you come to the podium, please? So Anne, as you know, speaks for the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, and you have something about climate change and conflict.
Yes, and we have also some good news, which I think is important to share sometimes too, although it's good news with a caveat, of course. So we are also about to, in a very timely manner, publish our results report 23. We are the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. The report is going to be published on Monday, so it will be under embargo until Monday. So I won't give you all the statistics, all the very interesting results, but I will give you the 3 key findings. And as we said, very timely moment, SDG Summit, there will be more about it later. And also the UNGA is, for the first time, going to really focus a lot on health, with 3 high-level meetings on health, one on pandemic preparedness, one on tuberculosis, and one on universal health coverage. So first of all, the good news, let's start with that, is that in 22, the Global Fund Partnership has regained momentum in the fight against the 3 diseases, HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. We had big setbacks from COVID-19, and now we can say that we put more people than ever on antiretroviral treatment, ARV for HIV, that we found and put on treatments more people than ever with TB, and that we distributed a record number of mosquito nets to prevent malaria. So overall, most of our prevention and treatment programs exceeded pre-COVID-19 pandemic results, and we're very proud to say that. It's also important to say it's not only the Global Fund, but the Global Fund's partnership, governments, civil society, activists, those very, very heroic survivors, people who are working on the front line. Number two, second finding, second trend. Despite this remarkable turnaround in programmatic results, you will not be surprised probably to hear that we are not on track, we're off track, off trajectory to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 3 of ending AIDS, TB, and malaria by 2030. Across all three diseases, but, and that's important to say, especially when it comes to TB and malaria, we will not achieve the 2030 target unless we take extraordinary steps. We must invest more, we must become smarter in how we invest, and we must also redouble our efforts, and that's very important, to end the stark inequities that fuel these diseases. We've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic that even with the best vaccines produced, the fastest, if there are inequities and people don't have access to these vaccines, it's not much use. So why are we so off track? Well, Jose has already mentioned some of these reasons. COVID-19 has not been the only obstacle on our road. In many countries in which the Global Fund invests, the fight against the three diseases is made much more challenging by a combination of interconnected and colliding crises, including, of course, climate change. We've seen Cyclone Freddy in Mozambique and Malawi that has made it much more difficult to fight malaria, and also that has increased the rate of malaria infection. Conflict, which makes, of course, our operations much more difficult. Ukraine, Afghanistan, Yemen, and more lately also the so-called Sahel Spring. Economic stresses and debt crisis, and for us also, very importantly, an alarming erosion of human rights, the stalling and reversing in gender equity in many countries in which we operate, the deepening inequities within and between countries. But, number three, I promised I'll be short. We should not be daunted by these multiple crises. If we are to achieve the SDGs, we need to accelerate progress. It's the same that my colleague from FAO said. And the Global Fund partnership is uniquely placed to do this. In the last 3 years, since COVID-19 hit us, we have demonstrated that we can adapt and we can save lives when conflict or disaster strikes. The Global Fund partnership is uniquely placed to accelerate the equitable deployment of game-changing innovations so that those who need them get them rapidly. And let me give you a few examples of these innovations. For example, the broader deployment of pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, including the new long-acting injection form, could have a significant impact in reinforcing HIV prevention in high-risk groups. But also, very interestingly, the dapivirine vaginal ring for HIV prevention gives girls and women the power to protect themselves from HIV. TB, you might not know, there's still one person every 2 minutes dying of TB. Key innovations, including new diagnostic tools such as mobile X-rays and lower cost molecular diagnostics, but also new treatments such as the 6-month oral treatment regimen for drug-resistant TB. And that's huge because these treatments are very difficult. 6 months, they used to be 18 months. So imagine when you have to take very difficult treatments for your mental health, etc., for 18 months. And the new short course TB preventive treatment called 3HP. Lastly, for malaria, which still kills a child under 5 every minute. There are a range of innovations in vector control, prevention, diagnostics, and treatment that will help us combat the alarming trends in infections and deaths. For example, dual active ingredient insecticide-treated mosquito nets. Dual active ingredient. They are much more efficient than the other mosquito nets, and they will be made available at scale from 2024. They're dramatically more effective. So we are using market-shaping tactics to increase access to treatments and preventive tools. We have recently managed to reduce the price of cutting-edge, WHO-recommended HIV treatments to $54 per person per year. Imagine the miracles that we can make with this. We invest in health system strengthening, laboratories infrastructure, but even more importantly, we've seen this also through the COVID crisis, we invest in community health workers. We estimate that 2 million people are on the front line to fight the 3 diseases. These are the people who do the actual work. And these results if it weren't for them. Let me finish with 2 real-life examples. We have the results report here under embargo, but I will give a few copies. We can see here Adelaide with her indoor residual spraying team. They have been spraying houses just after Cyclone Freddy hit in Mozambique. These are the people who are really on the front line. And this sex worker in South Africa is jumping up because she's just gotten a negative HIV result. And again, community health workers are doing a fantastic job. She could have this test done in a discreet way inside her house so that she doesn't have to fight stigma. Because these are the obstacles that are really on our road, stigma, and the fact that some people, even if you have the best innovations, some people might not have access to them. Thank you very much for your attention. The report is full of interesting infographics, case studies, and of course our team is also available for any questions. We also make pictures available, so you know where to find us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks for your patience. This has been a long briefing, but thanks, this was really interesting. And as you said, we will hear more about health next week at the 78th session of the General Assembly with the 3 high-level meetings you have mentioned. Questions to Anne in the room? I don't see any, or on the platform. I don't see either. So thanks again. Yes, and please distribute the material. I keep seeing on the chat, and this is also for FAO, if journalists are asking on the chat if you can send the information. Okay, so let's go. Normally you go first, this time you go last. Une fois n'est pas coutume. For an update on the council, Pascal Sim, merci.
Thank you, Alessandra. Just to remind you that right now, Claudia Mahler, the independent expert on the rights of older persons, is giving an interactive dialogue to present her latest report, which focuses on the violence against and abuse and neglect of older persons. She will also present a report on her latest visit to Nigeria, Bangladesh, and the Dominican Republic. And this afternoon around 4:15 p.m., Deputy High Commissioner Nada Al-Nashif will present the OHCHR report on economic, social, and cultural rights in the context of the COVID-19 recovery. Just want to remind you that in this room at 1 p.m., the Special Rapporteur on Unilateral Coercive Measures, Alena Duhan, will present a report on the impact of such measures on the right to health, as well as on the report on a recent visit to Syria. And on Monday, the Human Rights Council will hold interactive dialogues with 3 special procedures mandate holders, starting with the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention that will present its annual report, as well as reports on its recent visits to Botswana and Mongolia. It will be followed by an interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on Slavery, Tomoya Obokata, whose latest report focuses on homelessness as a cause and consequence of contemporary forms of slavery. He will also present a report on his recent visit to Costa Rica and Mauritania. And we will conclude the program on Monday with Livingstone Sewanaya, the independent experts on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. His report addresses the representation and participation of youth in international governing body, and he also has a report on his recent visit to Georgia. And one last point regarding investigations mandated by the UN Human Rights Council. As you probably saw yesterday afternoon, the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on the Islamic Republic of Iran issued a press release on the 1-year anniversary of Jina Mahsa Amini's death in custody. The press release is on the Fact-Finding Mission's webpage. And this coming Monday at 1:30 p.m. in this room, the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia will be giving a press conference regarding their latest reports to the Human Rights Council. My colleague Todd Pittman will moderate this press conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Any questions for the council? Don't see any in the room or online. So thank you very much. Good luck for next week. I have a few announcements. First of all, as I was saying before, we have this press conference by all the people I listed today as the preview of the SDG Summit. So we've sent you the media advisory. In the media advisory, you also find some information and a lot of links to the other high-level events of next week in New York in the framework of the 78th UN General Assembly session. And there are also media contacts for those who would like to get in contact with our colleagues in New York on the SDG aspects of the activities of next week. Here in Geneva, we have heard about the Human Rights Council. We also have the Committee on the Rights of the Child that is concluding this morning its review of Togo. And next Monday, the committee will have a public meeting in the Palais des Nations to launch the General Committee Comment 26 on children's rights and environment, with a special focus on climate change. The Committee on Enforced Disappearances that opened this week its 25th session is reviewing this morning the report on the Netherlands, and next Monday morning at 10 a.m. we'll start the report of Nigeria. The countries to be considered are stopping here. The others have been examined from the 11th of September. You'll find more information on that on our website. The OHCHR is giving today at 1 p.m. a press conference on the impact of unilateral coercive measures on the right to health, as we have heard Professor Alena Duham. And then I wanted to remind you that on the 21st of September, we will hold here at the Palais des Nations the 11th Geneva Peace Talks. This 11th edition is focusing on the International Day of Peace official theme, which is Actions for Peace, our ambition for the global goals. As of course, it coincides with the SDG Summit in New York. You may remember the format of this particular event. It's a series of short 8-minute talks where speakers share their vision and stories of peace with the audience. It will be held, as I said, on the 21st of September at 4 p.m., from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., followed by a reception. You are kindly invited. And that will be in room 17 of the Palais des Nations. But of course, you can also follow this online. I think I told you everything I had. Yes, and so I'll see if there are questions for me. I just forgot to mention that today is the International Day of Democracy, incredibly important. We sent you the message of the Secretary General. Any question? Not in the room, not on the platform. So I wish you a very good weekend and see you next week. And don't hesitate to ask us if you have any question, including on the events happening in New York. Thank you.